that the whole Kislev is connected with Hanukkah. Obviously, it's connected with YTD Kislev as well, but Hanukkah is, so to speak, the ancient holiday which is associated with Kislev, and therefore the whole month, starting even from the beginning of the month, is associated with the Hanukkah. And therefore, the parshas, which are associated with Kislev, they all really have like little secret Hanukkah vorts inside of them, right? So here we're going to find a remez in Hanukkah in Parshas Chai Sarah. You see, it's not the Rebbe. I don't even think he said this Sicha at that time per se. Yeah, he actually said this Sicha on Zos Hanukkah, and another piece of it was said on Yud Beis Tammuz. But when they put Likutei Sichas together, they like sort of slapped it into a Chai Sarah because there's an association with Chai Sarah. So you'll see, it's not really about the parsha so much. So he says like this: the days of Hanukkah. And why do we have them? What were they founded on? Of course, this miracle of the jar of oil. As the Gemara states in Shabbos, quote, Lo matzu el pach echad shel shemen, v'lo hayabod ladlik el yom echad, naisabo neis v'idliku mimenu shmoni yamim. The Gemara says over there, when the Beis Chashmonai came back into the temple after it was ransacked, they only found one jar of oil, and they only had enough to light one day, and a miracle happened, and they lit 8 days. Neis kazeh, so we said a miracle of this sort, motzim gam etzel Sarah v'Rivka. We find a similar Hanukkah miracle by Sarah and Rivka. Where do we see this? Kefisha omrim Chazal, the pasuk. V'yah Yitzchak ha'ola Sarah imo. Right, when Yitzchak brought Rivka into his mother's tent. Right? It says he brought her back to his mother's tent, and Rashi says really it was his mother, right? He saw something which was reminiscent of his mother when he brought Rivka home, and that's how he like, so it was a sign that he knew he had the right girl. What did he see? Shener HaShabbos, Shen Hidliku Hayadolek Milele Shabbos Vad Lele Shabbos. That one of the things which was miraculously taking place in Sarah's tent was that she would light Erev Shabbos, her Shabbos candles, and it would stay lit until the next Erev Shabbos. And so when Rivka came in, this same miracle happened to her. And that's why he says he brought it back to her, Sarah's tent, and his mother, and Rashi sort of says, you should read it like this. He brought her back to the tent, and behold, it was his mother Sarah in this miracle that she also had this miraculous lighting. So in other words, it's very Hanukkah-dik, right? You have this miraculous, long-lasting lighting. Limrozos muvan shebenes Hanukkah yesh chidush al pei al pnei haneis shel nero Sarah v'Rivka. However, we have to say that there must be some kind of a chiddush in the Hanukkah miracle over and above the chiddush of Sarah and Rivka's miracle of the lights. Miyuchad kasher nes Hanukkah garam l'kaviyas Yom Tov miyuchad. And why do we have to say that there was something unique about Hanukkah? Because Hanukkah, whatever happened on Hanukkah, we declared a miracle and we declared a Yom Tov. And since we declared a Yom Tov, we declared the Yom Tov because something happened which never happened before. If we were basing it on the same exact miracle, Mistama, we wouldn't have thought that this was something that requires its own unique Yom Tov because it's something that's been seen before. Dochak Lomer, and it's very forced to say that the only quality that it has, Mipach Hashem and Shalimei Chanukah, it's very dochik to say, oh, what's the difference? You could say, well, the Hanukkah candle lasted 8 days, right? And the candle of Rivka only lasted 7 days. So that's true, but that's kind of like a weak reason to like all of a sudden declare some brand new fabulous reality of Hanukkah, if it already existed before, right? Because that's not what's called a Hevdel Mohusi. It's not a really significant enough of a difference in the miracle. It's just a difference in what we call kamus, which is a little bit more of the same thing. So that's not sufficient. So we have to say Hanukkah has something that miracle does not have. So let's understand what exactly was the miracle of Hanukkah, because it's not so simple. If you start digging into this in the Mefarshim and into the poskim, you're going to see that there's a wide variety of opinions of what the miracle of Hanukkah even really was. It's not so pashut what happened. So in general, you can divide the miracle into two different ways of understanding it. One is we're going to call kamus, right? Which means the amount of oil, right? Gadla benes. There was a miraculous amount of oil that was increased. And that's what the miracle of Hanukkah was. There was more oil made. In such a way that there would be enough oil for 8 full days. One of the ways of looking at, of saying that it was a miraculous amount of oil, is we could say that even after they filled it up, the jar was still full, right? Oh, kevan shekol yom matzu aneros meleim shemen kishtei deos u'mevuras b'beis Yosef. Or we can say that when they came back in the next day after they lit the candles the day before, they found that the jars of oil were still full. In other words, the actual candelabra was still full. Either way you look at it, the idea is that the oil increased miraculously in its amount, right? Either it increased in the jar or it increased in the actual lamps, but it's kind of the same idea. That's like one approach of what happened with this oil, that there was more and it was more abundant than it should have been, and that was the miracle. But there's another way of looking at it, right? So that's that. In that way itself, it had already two different kind of slight differentiation. But there's a whole other way of looking at it, which is a miracle of eichus hashemen, right? What is eichus? The quality of the oil. The miracle wasn't that there was more oil. The miracle was that something happened to the quality of the oil, and it changed. Kamus hashemen hamaspika ba'ofen tivi liyom echad bilvad dalka shmona yamim, which means they really only ever had the same little amount of oil that they found to begin with. They only had there was one jar, and there was never more than one jar. It's just that the quality of the oil that would normally last one day, it lasted 8 days. And what would that look like? That every day, only an eighth burned down, right? So really, they only found one jar, and there was never more oil. It's just that the jar turned miraculous, and it burned down slowly.
I thought it was always full.
I know. Now you're learning that there's all kinds of...
But the halach is it has to be full every day. You got to fill to the top.
Oh, so that's going to be something we're going to look at. That seemed to be a problem with that interpretation.
I believe,
but nonetheless, it's not so problematic that it's not brought in the Rishonim as a potential reality of what, in fact, happened in the Nes. Yeah.
I believe there's a midrash that says that when the dove was sent out from the Teva, it brought back the branch of olives. That was passed down to Abraham, etc., and that's the oil that was in the base of Mikdash.
Gewalt, yeah, okay. Kafi, so another miracle is that it was very, very old oil. It didn't spoil. Kafisha Omer Beis Yosef, right? And the Beis Yosef also says, "Shachalku es Hashem and shebapach l'shmona." This, by the way, again, who says the Beis Yosef? The same Beis Yosef that just brought us those two opinions, which was that a slight differentiation, that there was a miracle in the amount. He also brings this opinion that there was a miracle in the quality. And how he understands it is each day they just put an eighth in. And here too, there's two slight variations of how to understand it. Either they put in an eighth, or they poured the whole thing in day one and only an eighth went down. Similar though, right? I don't think so.
It's like for sure though, like it went out and they had to relight it?
Every day they had to put it out and relight it. Yeah, that was the mitzvah of Hatavas Haneros that we mention every day.
No, most of the time it just go all the way down. You have to put new oil and relight it. So here there's no opinions that have just stayed left for 8 days straight?
I didn't say that. All I'm saying is that at this, there's two. We didn't get to all the opinions there, but right now, amongst these two opinions, again, no one's saying that. Let me just stop you there. Even if it stayed lit past the time, they would have to come in and put it out and relight it, because that happened actually every day. In other words, there was we say in the morning in Abaya have Masada Seder, right? Hamaracha. So there's the Indian of the Hatavas Chamesh Neros, and there's a little break of Dama Tamid, and then Hatavas Shtei Neros. You remember seeing that every day? So they would light 5, and then they would do the sprinkle the blood, and they would light 2. So there's a whole Rashi in this Gemara of Shabbos where he explains that was only during the times where there was no miracle. In other words, he's not talking about the miracle of Hanukkah. He's talking about the miracle in the Beis Hamikdash, because there was a constant miracle in the Beis Hamikdash up until a certain time in history, and the miracle was the Ner Maravi never went out, and that's why it says, what is Hashem doing with a menorah in his Beis Hamikdash? Is it dark? Can he not see? L'orahu tzarich? Does he need it for light? So he said, no. It was a miracle for all the world to see. What was the miracle? And the miracle was there was this thing called the Ner Maravi, the Western candle. Of course, there's two different opinions of what that candle was, where it was, and how it was, whatever, which candle it was. But the point is, according to everybody, they lit it, and when they came back to deal with the candles the next day, it was still lit. So there is but they would put it out and light it again, because you have to light the menorah every day. But the point is, so even if you want to say they came back and it was still lit, you still have to light it again. Fine.
Was there a shamish on menorah in the Beis Hamikdash?
I don't believe there was. How did they light it? There must have been. They lit the middle one, and they lit the other ones from the middle one.
Even. It wasn't like one was higher than the other.
No, there was no shamish. The fees. There's a whole machlokes whether you're allowed to light one candle, like with a little splinter, light it from there, and then go light another one. And basically, you're not. So what they would do is they had these long wicks, and they would light one of them, and they would light the other candles of the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash from the wicks of the other ones. Because from one mitzvah to a mitzvah, you're allowed to. Anyway, so we have these two opinions. Was it a miracle of the quantity or a miracle of the quality? Really, and each one of those had two small variations of how you would look at that. So he says, "Lefize yotzi lechora shabiror im neis Chanukah domi leneis haneru shel Sarah v'Rivka toloi b'shnei ofanim elu." So it comes out that if we're going to try and make a comparison to clarify if the miracle of Chanukah was in fact like the miracle of Rivka and Sarah and Rivka, it depends on these two ways. V'atem le'ofen hasheni. Right? If we want to say that it was the second way of looking at it, Shnei Anisim hem mesug echad. Tosefes eichutit v'yecholes ha'ava shel Hashemin. Right? If we want to say that the miracle of Hanukkah was a miracle of quality, then it really was exactly the same as the miracle of Sarah and Rivka. Why? Because she lit it, and it just went down slowly. Right? There was no extra oil coming in. There was no increase in oil. It just went down slowly and it burned a whole week. So that would be basically the same as that opinion of the Hanukkah menorah. B'shnei mikraim dala kaner harbe yoser mizman regil. In both of those situations, the candle simply burned for longer than a candle should. It was a miracle in the quality of the oil. And the difference between them would simply be that in Hanukkah, it was a little bit extra quality, right? Because it lasted 8 days. So in other words, it was super strength as opposed to just super. It was super strength as opposed to just super strength oil when it came to the Hanukkah. And Hanukkah had nes nifrad kol yom shayadliku as a menorah kol yom. And also one more point, which was connected with what you just said, that every day of Hanukkah they would have sort of seen this miracle again, because they had to put the menorah out and light it again. Whereas in Sarah's case, they just lit it once and it stayed lit the whole time. Small differentiation, but the basic miracle is the same. It's a miracle of the quality of the oil, right? Whereas by Sarah and Rivka, they lit it once and it stayed lit the whole time. But if you want to say that the miracle was a miracle of quantity, which means every time they poured the oil in, whoop, the jug was full again, right? Or after it burned down, it popped back up again in the lamps. Then we can say that Hanukkah was a new type of miracle, right? So if the Rebbe is looking for a way to say that Hanukkah was a chiddush, and that's why he made a holiday over it, seemingly he found his man. Because you could say that that's the difference between the miracle of Sarah and Rivka, that this was a miracle of abundant oil, more and more oil, of kamus, right? That the names was that more oil was created miraculously, and this was not found in the candles of Sarah and Rivka. And seemingly like Shalom al Yisrael, we have a reason why. First of all, we know what happened at Hanukkah, because that would solve the mystery of what the miracle was. And also we know why it's unique and never happened before. What's the problem with it? It did happen before. Look at the next page. He says, however, according to this, lo chiddush b'mahus neis Hanukkah. This is still not a chiddush in the miracle of Hanukkah. Why? Because you read the Haftorah a couple of weeks ago, right? We find the exact same type of miracle in the Tanakh with the whole story of Elisha, that she found this woman that had creditors, and he made a miracle. He says, bring me all your jars, your empty jars, and start pouring. And she's poured until the jars ran out, which means there was what? A miraculous amount of oil. So it happened already. Asu chashemen, right? Pour the oil. And so again, if Hanukkah is going to be made a holiday out of it, then we need to find some miracle that never happened before. And both opinions of what happened with the Hanukkah miracle already happened before. So we're like out of luck. Everyone on board so far? Right? Koshi. So you have, like you mentioned, not only a difficulty in what you said that they weren't, the lamps weren't full, but each one of these two explanations, whether it was the kamos or echus, quality or quantity, there's actually a problem in each one of these explanations. In other words, everything the Beis Yosef has to say, which is both explanations and each variation on them, the Rebbe is like, I've got some serious questions on your entire theory here. The Fiesber al Tosefes Bekamos. Let's start with the Indian of the increased amount of oil. So he says this question is known. This is not necessarily the Rebbe's question. This is asked in the Klei Chemda. He brings different mafarshim. Rashi even gets involved in this question. He says, "Keitzad of Shayad la'adlikas haneres b'mikdash b'shemen shemekuru b'neis." Kesuv shemen zayis zach la'alos ner tamid. How are you allowed to light the menorah with oil, which is not actually olive oil? It's miracle oil, right? And miracle oil was fine. It burns well. The only thing is, there's a pasuk that says when you light the menorah, it has to be shemen zayis. And shemen zayis means oil from an olive. So in other words, this whole thing is based on lighting the menorah on puzzle oil, because it's not shemen zayis. It looks like shemen zayis, smells like shemen zayis. It's, in every way, it's like the AI of shemen zayis, but it's not actually oil from an olive. What's that?
Quantity I could understand. Bread came out of nowhere. But what can be quality of oil?
No, the quantity, you wouldn't have that problem. I'm sorry, only the quantity you have the problem. The quality, it is shemen zayis all day long. Okay, but he's saying let's first pick apart the quantity problem, right?
There was a problem.
I did, but we're not going to do them all at one time. I mean, I'm good, but I'm not that good.
But did it originate as olive oil?
What's that?
Did it originate as olive oil? It's just the molecular is the
Yeah, but
same.
you talk molecular, but I'm talking about an olive and the oil from which it comes. And it's not that, right? As I said, it smells the taste, it looks the same, it even has the same molecular biological reality, but it's not from an olive. And the pasuk says, shemen zayis. It has to be oil of an olive. So so what would you have to say then if you're going to stand with that miracle of quantity? You would have to say that the kavana of shemen ain't a kavana shemen mekurim zayis. You'd have to go back to that verse and say the verse didn't really mean olive oil, right? It just meant it has to be oil that looks like and tastes like and has the same biological molecular structure of olive oil, but it's not olive oil. It's nice and clean. It burns the same way, but the verse doesn't really mean olive oil. That's the only recourse you'd have, right? Because you can't have both.
So I think I mentioned something. I didn't believe why it can't be olive oil. It's just because it's quantity.
No, we're saying that the pasuk says you must have olive oil in the menorah. And we're saying if you have a miracle of quantity, then what happened? The first day, let's say they had enough to fill the menorah one time up. They filled it, olive oil, yotzi. The next day, where did this oil come from? Miracle oil. It was created yesh mi'ayin from the Eibishter, right? It's not olive oil.
Why couldn't you do
So
it?
therefore, it's either you have to say that the pasuk doesn't mean shemen zayis, or you have to say that that's not what happened in this miracle because it goes against the pasuk. So, neither one is a very good option, right? Now let's look at the quantity. Nope. Let's look at the quality interpretation. It was super strong oil. He says we also have a problem. Halach legabe menorah kovas ten la midas tedolekes mi'erev ad boker. Reuven already came up with this problem. The halacha says when you fill the jars, the Lutzik, Rashi says. What are they called? This on top of the thing. The neros, they call them the neros. When you fill these little jars of oil on top of the menorah, the halacha says you have to put in it the amount which will enable it to burn from evening to morning. Right? They lit them in the evening, Ben Arbaim, and they burned all the way till morning when they would fix them. And since every day of the year has a little bit of a different amount of evening and morning as the winter comes and the summer comes, so they said, what are we going to do? Every day we're going to figure out how much amount. The Chachamim came along and said, you know what? We're going to use a chetzi log, half of a log of oil. Why did they choose that amount? Who remembers? Read some Rambam here and there. Because that's the amount you need for the long winter nights of the Tekufas Tevis. They said, let's find the longest night, and we'll put in enough for the longest night, then it'll be enough for the rest of the days. Right? So they found out that this is what you need for the longest night, and he said that's the amount of oil you have to put in there every day. But no, and here's another issue. So first of all, we'd have to sort of assume that chetzi log also comes to the top of the jar, because besides the fact that there's a certain measure that has to be in there, and I guess an eighth of the original pach doesn't cut it, there's another issue with saying that there was a miracle in the quality, which is that it burned down a little bit every time, because you have to have full measures when it comes to Kodesh, right? You can't have half a, right? That's why they had all these different measuring pots in the base of Mikdash, because if you wanted to bring a revis, you can't bring something that holds 2 revis and fill it up halfway and just sprinkle it on there and think you get away with it. Everything you had to be filled to its top. And in fact, there's a halacha that says when you're makadesh a kli shares, in other words, to take something, a kli that someone donates to the base of Mikdash, and turn it into an actual holy vessel, means you have to use it at least one time. The way that you make it holy is that you use it, and you use it full. When you fill it up and use it properly, it becomes holy. So we see from here, clay Mikdash have to be full. So this whole idea of qualitative oil, it doesn't work. Not if you say we poured in an eighth every morning, or not if you say we filled it up the first time full, and then every day after, it lost only an eighth, because day 2 would already be not full. Yeah.
I thought with one of the things in the base of Mikdash, that they would have like a surplus because the measurement was slightly off. And then they'd use it every like 50 years or something.
You're talking about Ketores.
Yeah.
Specifically,
yeah.
And again, that's only the Ketores is the idea of when they made the raw ingredients. When they made the raw ingredients, they had a little extra they put on the side. But when they actually offered it in its proper kli, they'd have to take the exact amount, right? It had to be full. We're going to be done with class. Let me just finish this paragraph. According to this explanation we said about the quality, so then we have a halachic issue with the qualitative answer for the miracle for these 2 reasons. It didn't have the chetzi log, which was its proper amount, right? Either had more or less, depending on which day it was, and it wasn't full. So that's also problematic. We have now nothing to work with. If you say the miracle was quantity, you got a problem. It's fake oil. If it's quality, you got a problem with your measures, and therefore we really have nowhere else to go. Real quick. Hagam lefi avsharus hashniya yotzish b'chol echad me'ayamim chutz miyom hashmini lo haisa midas shtei gdolekes me'ad boker el yom rishon haisa menura melea pi shmone min hanachutz b'yom sheni pi sheva. So he says also, the whole idea is, we'll get to it next time. I don't want to rush it. Okay, it's a cool little point. We'll make it the end. Till Sunday, my friends.